He asked, well, you probably all hear better than me. He's closer to you than he is to me. If Teller and I disagree on stuff. You know, Teller and I have entirely different lifestyles. We have different friends. We have differences of opinion on every single thing in the show. I mean, every move that is done in the show, every trick that's in the show, we fight over completely. That's the joy of us working together. As far as philosophically, whether you're talking about religion, or whether you're talking about politics, or whether you're talking about money, or whether you're talking about punctuality, we agree 100%. It's remarkable. And one of the things we found is that you can disagree about all the stuff that doesn't matter, and that's really fun if you agree on all the stuff that does matter. And I will also say that in defense of Teller, because he gets so pissed off at this, Teller will get people coming up to him after the show furious about something that was said on bullshit. And they will say to Teller, you know, I was so offended when Penn said this about the 9/11 truthers and conspiracy. What an awful thing he did. I'm glad you're okay. You're my favorite one. And Teller always responds, fuck you. You hypothesize that I'm the kind of person that would stand there and not say anything, while a show with my name on it said shit that I did not agree with. If anything, everything Penn says is a toned-down version of what I believe. I'm the one who is much less tolerant than Penn. We went in for a meeting on the X-Files, right? I'm looking over at Glenn, yeah. There was a meeting with the X-Files, and the Big Cheese, at the time, the X-Files was a very popular show. I had never seen it, but it was huge. And the guy who ran the whole thing, the Big Cheese, called us in for a meeting. They wanted to write a show around Penn and Teller. And I was explaining that if it was, even though it was a fantasy show, if we're going to use our real name, Penn and Teller, we didn't want to have have a supernatural event. Now that's a very hard call to make, because once you're in fiction, anything supernatural can happen and it's morally okay. There's no problem with that at all. But if you're using my name, I don't feel good about it. So I was explaining that, and then we argued a little bit. We argued for about 3 or 4 minutes, and I hung tough. And Teller hadn't said anything, not because Teller doesn't speak in meetings. He does speak in meetings, but usually he lets me lead. You know, I'm the chirp, I'm the one that talks, let the big guy go. So I'm talking, and then the guy makes this mistake, where he turns to Teller and says, well, I can see why you don't talk, with him saying all this crazy stuff. Man, were we thrown out of that room fast. He started with, you stupid, ignorant motherfucker. He then went on to explain that what this guy had written his whole life was pure shit. And that you could write stuff that had the feeling of supernatural and didn't have any real supernatural, because after all, there was Sherlock Holmes and Psycho, you stupid motherfucker. After we got to Sherlock Holmes and Psycho and a few other examples, we were thrown out of the room. And I was so proud of him, you know. Because when it started, it was like what Teller was supposed to say was, yeah, Penn gets carried away. We want to be on this primetime show, so I'll be able to handle him. I'll be able to work this out. But Teller instead got thrown out of the room. And Glenn Ally, who's over there and our manager, you would have preferred that we had been on that show, wouldn't you? By a lot. Yeah, okay. Is there another question? I'm going to go way to the back, yeah?
Hi. Philosophically speaking, in the absence of God, what do you interpret consciousness to be? Where do you think it came from? And where do you think it will evolve?
I don't know. with those questions, you've got to remember you're talking to a dumbass, carny trash juggler magician. It's stuff I read about. I read the Pinker stuff, and I read through that. But anything I would say would just be a slight misunderstanding of stuff that I've read. Slight is being very kind to me.
How and when did you become an atheist?
I became an atheist, like so many people, reading the Bible. Anyone who asks me what literature to read on atheism, I tell them to read the Bible. I am always reading the Bible. I try to read, of course, not religiously, but I try to read one chapter of the Bible a day, which takes you about 4 years to cycle through. And the chapters are pretty short until you get to that baguette shit. But you can kind of rotate through. I was 15 or 16 years old, and I was a huge fan of all the famous atheists at that time that I knew, which were Frank Zappa, Randy Newman, and Martin Mull, who were and are still 3 of my big heroes. And we had a pastor at the First Congregationalist Church in Greenfield, Massachusetts, who was very, very open in the youth group and very pleasant. And he gave me stuff to read and talk to me. And I finally read a lot of things, Bertrand Russell, Why I'm Not a Christian, and a few other things. And like many people who become atheists, it wasn't, people become religious often, there's no rule on it, but often at a downtime in their life with trauma and with horrible suffering. And people usually become atheists slowly with a lot of studying, a great deal of reading. And there's a thing that's said to me that offends me so much when people say, I'm sorry you're an atheist, you must have been treated really badly by religious people, or you were sent to a religious school where they beat you, or your dad was religious and beat you. I think that what turned me atheist, if anything, was too much love in my life. My mom, my dad, and my sister. My dad never got that memo, the memo you're supposed to get, which I just ripped up and won't look at, that says, dads are supposed to give conditional love and moms give unconditional love. Fuck that. My dad gave me absolute, complete, unconditional love. So did my mom and so did my sister. And I never felt I had to reach out to find love somewhere else. And I could look into my children's faces, not to get too sappy, and I just don't think I want any more. I mean, everything in the world is enough for me. And I was happy. Everybody's supposed to talk about how dysfunctional and miserable they were as a child, and I had my rebellion and so on, but overall, I was happy. I was well cared for, and I had people who loved me, and I read the Bible, and the God of the Bible seemed vengeful, capricious, cruel, and crazy. There seemed to be no sense to it at all. And as we said once on Bullshit, the Bible seemed to contain equal amounts of morality, history, and pizza. There was no morality in there. There was no history in there. And so slowly, I guess at about 16, I started talking atheism. And then finally, our minister, the pastor, I guess to his credit, said that in the discussion group, I was turning more people atheist than he was turning Christian, and so I should just leave. And he said to my parents that he really liked me, made friendly with me the rest of his life, but I should probably not go to a church group anymore. And I stopped going. My dad died a Christian. He lived his whole life a Christian and died a Christian. But my mom became an atheist, or came out of the closet an atheist, when she was in her 80s. And that story is another long one, and is also told in the book. But I guess it was 16, and it was reading the Bible and thinking about it, and also the inspiration of probably of that list, I know Taylor wants me to say Zappa, but of that list, it's probably Martin Mull, and then Zappa, and then Randy Newman. So, any more questions? How long am I going?